Businesses thrive by knowing customer insights because today's insights are tomorrow's facts. At iResearch, we live and breathe insights. And despite searching high and low, we were unable to find a customer insights podcast that answers one of the most important questions in business. Why do customers do what they do? So we launched one. Hi, I'm your host, Darshan Mehta.
I'd like to introduce you to Renee Brown. She is known as a leader in the financial, investing, social media, and brand integration spaces with a robust skill set that includes financial services, marketing, finance, management, and social media. She has served in numerous marketing leadership roles since 1995 in financial services and healthcare, and she has led teams of all sizes with marketing investments ranging from $5 million to over $100 million. Currently, Renee serves as the interim chief marketing officer at the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences. Welcome, Renee.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here with you.
You've had quite a diverse career, and I want to ask you, spanning over 2 decades or so, what are some of the aha moments that have really impacted your journey from early on?
I've had so many, and when I think back through my career, some of my favorite moments of learning have been related to research. And I know you've written extensively about research and how we can go through different changes over the decades and see changes that are on the horizon and actually live through the change happening. I'll give you an example. I was on a corporate jet with the CEO at one point in my career. And I remember saying, at some point, we're going to have Wi-Fi on these airplanes. And he's like, oh, no, that's not going to happen. And now it's just commonplace that we have Wi-Fi. So you probably even remember working before email and the changes that we go through. And oftentimes the research can be a really great indicator of what's the big shift that's going to happen next. And so as I think about different aha moments I've had, I would say the best research and insights from consumers have come from ethnographic research, meaning when you actually get into the space of the consumer or the business that you're talking to really understand pain points. Because at the core of any business, whatever industry, is you have a product that's going to solve a business or consumer need, and they're willing to pay you to solve that problem, right? And so I'll give you the first ethnographic research I conducted was back in the mid-90s, 1990s in New Orleans, Louisiana. And so I was with Hibernia Bank, which now is part of Capital One. And we were located 2 blocks from Bourbon Street. And I was in the small business area supporting them in marketing. And what we were doing was ethnographic research with the businesses in the French Quarter. And through that research, we found the biggest pain point, because cash was king and in some ways still is that they had to deposit cash late at night in the French Quarter. And somebody in that business had a very dangerous job. And so we heard repeatedly these business owners expressing the challenge. Through that research, Hibernia opened the first of its kind, and now it's common, a special location where somebody that might be carrying thousands in cash can walk into one door safely and it closes, and then another door before they actually deposit the cash because they were getting mugged trying to deposit cash. And so now that's commonplace at any financial institution. But at the time, it was really, really cutting edge that our branch there in the quarter was protecting those business owners and the cash that they would, bring in on a daily basis. So, but the bank would have never gotten to that insight had they not done the deep sitting down with the business and then explaining pain points that they have, fear that their employee could get mugged at 11 or 12 at night, right? So anyway, that being able to understand a pain point and solve it is both the most fun in business and even more fun in marketing, because it's really easy to market something that solves a problem.
I think you bring up an interesting example. A lot of times people are looking for insights that are earth-shattering, that are going to change everything. But often they're just simple things that when you think about it, say, oh, I should have thought of that, but they often are not thought about, or they don't get revealed until you actually have the kind of conversations you're talking about.
Absolutely. Exactly. And sometimes those small things, they make a lot of sense. but no one has figured out, how do we solve that? It is a problem, and then how do we go about solving it and making money doing that in the process?
I want to go back a little bit in time with you, because I think you had quite an aha moment at the age of 16, if I recall correct. Maybe you can share with us what happened at 16 to you.
On my 16th birthday, I took over the board at a radio station from my sister, who was a DJ at the time, in the little country town of Kaplan, Louisiana. And so I became a DJ at this country station on my birthday at 6 a.m. on a Saturday. And it was a huge moment when my sister walked out of the control room and out of the building. And I was responsible for a radio station at that age. And it was fascinating to not only, you rise to the level that somebody expects you to behave. It definitely causes you to say, okay, this is my responsibility. I need to do this the right way. It was a great experience. I actually worked in radio through college, through graduate school, and it helped me pay for my education. So I have a lot of fun stories about radio stations handing the keys over to kids.
So I think that really exposed you a lot to communication, messaging, marketing, and all the things that sound like it really impacted your life as you went from that moment on. And again, these are aha moments that you weren't anticipating. They just sometimes fall in your lap. And then have you learned to kind of embrace these aha moments now as a result of what happened early on for you?
Absolutely. And I think being able to, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. You've heard that saying. If you can see patterns of behavior over time, you can actually get a good sense of where things are going. And back in 2011, I was working in the investments arm of the institution I was with, leading brokerage and wealth marketing. And at the time, social media was just coming into play, and everyone in leadership at that organization had a really negative perspective on social media. I, on the other hand, said, wait, this could really disrupt our business. And I was, talking with leadership saying, we give advice to consumers about their money. If social media works, communities of people could start doing that, and we could be out on the side. And so I started talking about how social media could change business. And fundamentally, it has. I know that folks know that clearly now because it's 2024. That was, 12 years ago. But what it did, it less disrupted the investment advice business. It more disrupted the expectation of large companies to be in control. Meaning, as I moved from that role into leading social media at Wells Fargo, I saw so clearly that leadership at that institution at the time really felt like they were in control of the message. If something happened, they could get a complaint letter and send a note back from the president or whatnot and just keep it under wraps. Well, what social media did is it democratized decision-making at large companies, where a consumer, if they weren't being treated well, could just spray paint the front door of the company, meaning go on the Facebook page and tell everybody what happened. And the business couldn't control that. Instead, you had to respond to it. And one of the experiences I had in that role was going viral. And now in marketing, everyone wants to go viral, right? I never want to go viral, even for a good reason. And that is because when things go viral, you really have to ride the wave. You cannot control it. It can take off in any different direction. Something that's positive can become negative or vice versa. And so anyway, it was just a really great learning. And at the time, the company went viral. I was getting calls from, you name it, everyone saying, make it stop. And I'm like, I can't make it stop, guys. We can take down a post. Somebody's going to reload it. It's going to be back up in 2 seconds. We've got to decide how we're going to respond to it because we're not in charge. And so that was the biggest learning in social media for me was to deal with our leadership really struggling because they weren't in charge of the message anymore. The consumers were, and they still are.
Yeah, I think you bring up an interesting point. I think for many years, the communication method was, one way, right? The advertiser or the bank in this case control the message going out. But with social media, now it's much more of a conversation. And so the only option you have really is to be a part of that conversation. And even being not part of it is a way of being part of it, which is going to hurt you. So even if you get negative criticism, it's better to be part of that conversation. Because oftentimes people I don't think ding you for making a mistake, but they often will ding you if you don't respond properly or at all.
You are spot on. And that's the core of great public relations. But it's really hard for people who might be of a different generation who aren't accustomed to not calling the shots. Whereas younger people just get it because like my daughter was raised in a world where it is dialogue. We were talking about radio earlier. Radio's one direction. Like my generation and before are used to one direction. But now younger people, everything is a dialogue, including the rules at a company.
Interesting enough, that's what lends to the authenticity people are looking for, right? I mean, companies can be human, right? They can make mistakes, but it's not the mistake that counts. It's actually how you react to that and address it moving forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. And one other research area that I wanted to share with you that I really enjoyed. At one point, I was working with a team and we were doing research to understand more about how people feel about finances, particularly saving for retirement, which is one of the hardest things for everyone to do across cultures, is to figure out how much do I need to save to be able to stop working at some point and enjoy life, which is everyone's dream. And so we were doing research and the results were so awesome, and I couldn't share the results publicly. And let me tell you why. What we found in this research was that people would prefer to talk about religion and sex before finances with their family. Like talking about money with a family was more taboo than topics that you would think would be very taboo. And so I really wanted to get out and, talk about it, but our company did not feel talking about sex, religion is the thing to do. But it was such a great insight because it goes to the fact that, things that we can be really insecure about, money is so at the top of that. And so for financial services companies to realize that and figure out how can we open dialogue with families, particularly talking to like your parents about, are they ready for whatever's coming, right? And that's a really awkward conversation. And any good financial services company should help their clients figure out how to talk about money a little bit better. So anyway, that was a really fun research project. I was just bummed we didn't talk about it publicly because it was a little racy.
I'm curious, why are people hesitant to talk about money versus the other two topics?
I think it shows vulnerability. So some people, particularly those who aren't great with money, can get into debt situations and make bad decisions, and they really don't want to tell people that they've messed up, even if it was long ago and they've resolved it. And so I really think it's a sense of vulnerability that causes people to pause. I don't think it's, that people don't want to brag about what they've saved or whatnot. I really think it's more about mistakes that they've made or a lack of understanding whether they're on track or not. So talking about a topic that they feel is maybe out of their depth is probably a big part of it, would be what I would say.
And of course, that's a huge opportunity for a financial institution to help educate and nurture that understanding, right?
Exactly. And there are differences, gender differences. And I've studied gender in college. I did a study on humor and gender, which was interesting. But when it comes to finances, particularly investing, a lot of people have gender assumptions that men are better than women. But in reality, all of the data shows that women run households and make most of the day-to-day financial decisions of any family unit. Oftentimes the investments are left to the male, but that whole component, the gender piece of money is also a very interesting space that isn't really talked about as much. But it probably in the United States culture is a very interesting space. It might be different in other cultures.
So we talk about insights. I'm curious, how do you define an insight?
Wow. To me, an insight is something that shakes the norms of what we expect. So often when I start a research project, I start with the end in mind. What is it that we would use this research for? And oftentimes we think we know the answer. So the last research project I did here at the university I'm serving now, we really wanted to understand areas that people thought were most important in their graduate studies. And we had assumptions. We had the top 5 that we thought we'd hear, particularly in how the university talks about how we help these students with their success. What came back was insightful because it wasn't what we expected. We expected they wanted to know about the university. Students don't want to know about the university. They've done that research. They know what they need to know. What they want to hear is how we're going to help them succeed and get a job. It's not about us, it's about the student, which is obvious, right? In marketing, it is about the student. Sometimes we can get all in our heads around what's the most important thing somebody should know about us. And really the only thing the students want to know is how are we going to help them? And, it was an aha only because it was so obvious. And it really helped my team recenter around what's most important, which is let's talk about all the ways we're going to help you with your licensure exam to become a doctor, with how you're going to have a job after you finish that. We have all that information. We were assuming they knew that. And in reality, they do need to hear that more from us. To me, an insight is something we don't expect, and that helps change the way we're communicating.
It's also to get into a core truth that and reveals itself as you start peeling the onion layers. You get to a core truth at some point. Would you agree?
Yes, and truth is a very frightening word, isn't it? What is true? But no, I agree with you. And honestly, I'm talking in broad strokes here, but I think we need to keep in mind that not everything is homogenous, and one person's truth can be another person's non-truth. And so anyway, just something to keep in mind. Like when I think of managing people, I try to work at that individual level as opposed to a group understanding. So anyway, I diverge.
Well, again, this example, I mean, it wasn't earth-shattering and surprising that students want to know how to get a job and succeed once they graduate, right? But it's just one of those things that gets lost in all the noise. So I'm curious, what tips would you give someone on ferreting out the noise and getting to those key kernels of insights that are really the ones to shape your decisions moving forward?
Getting out of our offices and off of the Zoom and actually talking to, if you're working with consumers or with businesses, or in my case with students, I sit on a campus, and oftentimes I get in the office and I'm on calls or in meetings all day long. Do I walk around and talk to students? Not enough. To me, I think that's the most important, is to get out of. So when you're in management, and also, I loved shifting industries, because if you're in one industry for very long, you've kind of seen everything and done everything, and nothing is surprising you anymore, right? You're not learning anything new. You're kind of that mouse on the wheel. And so changing industries gives you a whole different perspective, new things to look at, new considerations. And so also talking to the end consumer is the best way to make sure you actually are in the right place with insights. And it's easy to fall into a trap of not doing that on a daily basis, like scheduled research, but more, just walking and talking to people.
So I think you're right. And I think when you have these conversations, there's a little bit of an art to it, right? It's not just having it, but I think you start off what I used to call as an inverted pyramid. You start off broad, but you get more and more specific. And as you do that, you're getting to different layers at a deeper level and uncovering things. And if you think about it, people are thinking as you're talking about a topic, because they may not have even thought about it, but as you start getting into it, they start thinking deeper. And that's where those real kernels of insight start coming to the surface.
Yeah. And I think I agree. And I think it's so important that in those situations, we give people the license to disagree or to say something that we might not want to hear. And that's the most important thing, is to allow people to be honest. And even if it's something we might not want to hear, that's so critical. So how do you create a safe space? I was sharing some new content with some folks recently, and I just started by saying, look, if you really hate this, I want to hear that you really hate this. And it just lets people breathe and say, okay, I can be honest with whatever it is this person's getting ready to share with me. And I think that just allowing people to know it's a safe space is also important so that, like you mentioned, the arc actually happens, because sometimes people just want to be nice.
And those are the types that can have the potential to become your super fans.
Right. Exactly. I mean, some of the best companies have examples of where they have made mistakes and corrected it, have listened to consumers and fixed things. There are many examples of brands that have done that. And there are also examples of others that didn't, and they're not with us anymore. Yeah, you think of the Blockbusters of the world who didn't listen and understand that change was happening around them.
So when it comes to social media, digital marketing, what are the things that you think companies are still missing out on? They don't quite understand about this whole new way of doing this. It's not so new now, but it's still new to a lot of, as you said, it depends on the generation that grew up with this or not.
One of the things I think is still a constant struggle is authenticity. When you have an organization, a company, an entity, how do you articulate? That's professional. How do you articulate professionalism, but then show your human side? It's a really, really tough thing. It's actually a balance that we struggle with. I've seen every company I've served have struggled with this because you want to be super professional and show that you know your stuff and you're relevant and smart as heck and all of that. But also sometimes students just want to see that you're fun and have an opinion on things and know how to be playful. So TikTok is a great example. We try to be too professional on TikTok, and so we look like we don't belong there. We need our students to be on TikTok to show the fun things that they do when they're not, in the work of trying to become a doctor. Because, even the most serious of people can have fun while they're learning. And so I think that's a piece with social media that every company will continue to struggle with, is that sometimes something that's very informal and maybe too playful is actually what your consumer wants to see. And so does it harm your brand or does it actually help your brand to show that you're human? I think it helps, but then, you have so many constituencies inside of a company saying, no, that doesn't meet our standards, And so anyway, I think that's the challenge of being authentic, but professional at the same time. And those two things can be counter to one another.
What role, or if any, are you seeing that AI is impacting your world of marketing now?
AI, when it comes to search engine optimization, is a real challenge. So that Google and the use of AI is a double-edged sword for every organization. And I'm a huge fan of how it can help in marketing to get some things started. It also can be challenging because we live by algorithms today in digital marketing. We are at the mercy of what some AI algorithms are doing. And that can change on a dime. So AI is something that we have to stay on top of constantly. When it comes to content, we have seen some agencies rely on AI too much. If you write blogs using AI, they will not be picked up the right way from a search standpoint. So I'm more of a purist. I'm fine if somebody starts by using an AI tool, but it needs to be fundamentally rewritten or else it won't work from a marketing standpoint.
Yeah, I think that goes back to your point about being authentic, right? I mean, AI can get you a good head start, but I think you need to adapt it to your particular purpose or need because that's what's going to make it more authentic and real.
Yeah. And I have a daughter who's a senior in college this year, and she has resisted AI. She was asking me, she was having a challenge with something unrelated to a course. And I'm like, hey, put that into AI and see what comes back. And that helped her get unstuck. But I think that's where AI can help a person. When it comes to a business, I think the jury is still out. I think AI is going to overall be a positive thing, but we're at such a moment of great change. And some companies are overreacting, in my opinion, to this AI trend. So it is a disruptor. AI is a huge disruptor, and I look forward to seeing how we bend it to the positive and not to some of the negative ways it can be used.
So what are some areas you want to get into moving forward that you find very interesting and some opportunity you think that could be used or tapped into for marketing purposes?
Well, the whole space of influencers is one that I don't think anyone's fully figured out. And so it goes back to that whole consumers being in charge. The best marketing is word of mouth and referrals. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. If your friend says you need to go to that doctor or that hairstylist or that company, that is the best marketing you will ever receive. And I think some influencers are so see-through right now that they're being paid to influence. But real influencers, when you have super fans or brand fans, I think you called them super fans earlier, how do you make them your marketing tool ongoing and systematically and programmatically? And what does that look like? Because, yes, influencers have monetized their influence, but what about the average consumer being your marketing, going forward? And what does that look like? And how do we monetize that? Because I'd rather pay a super fan than pay Google.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, because they're more credible. But I'm curious, have you figured out a way to actually make that happen?
No, I haven't yet. Once I do, let's get back on the line and talk about it. I haven't figured it out, but I think that is the future of real change. And when I say change, I mean companies growing and stepping away from the competition is when there's a movement around whatever it is the organization is doing. And so, like REI, you think of that organization and their stance, and they've had a real huge social push. And people who are REI folks, they're just always going to be that. And so there aren't many companies that get to that movement level, but I think that's where there's so much power. And how can larger, more traditional organizations find their bearings in that world of making a difference and being part of something bigger than just making money? I mean, I think everybody knows companies need to make money to survive, but it can't be the only thing, right?
Right. That's why I think actually nowadays, even in the thinking with college, and let me know if you disagree, but people are no longer buying just products or going to college. They're actually looking for the experience, right? They want to have a unique experience. And that I think is the key, because if you can create a unique experience, because ultimately unique experience can evoke an emotion. And if you can evoke an emotion, the two things you're most likely to do: one, you're going to probably come back for a repeat of that experience. But two, you're more likely to then share it.
Yes. And aren't we emotional creatures? Everyone talks about all the research they do before they make a decision, but so much of our decision making is emotional. We're emotional creatures.
In fact, I recently got into the F&B business and opened up a Latin American restaurant. And the two things I told my team is we exist for two reasons. One is to delight our customers, but the second is we want to evoke an emotion with every dish. And it's the same reason I just talked about it, because that will hopefully get them to come back, but more likely they're going to want to take pictures and share it.
Exactly. That's really brave of you. Now, I'm assuming you're a fan of the show, The Bear, then? Anybody who's seen that show should be scared of opening, going into area. But it's also, to your point, I mean, that's some of what that show brings to life is how do you make people feel? It's not necessarily what they eat, it's how they feel, which is awesome. So, yeah.
So I'm curious, if you were to go back in time and meet the 16-year-old Renee who was about to take over a radio station, what three tips or words of wisdom would you be giving her at this point after the journey you've had so far?
I didn't have the self-confidence at 16 in my own thinking. And so probably the reminder of be confident in the way you think. And that is the truth of success. And so let me explain that a little bit more as my point number one. So many people have no original thoughts. Taking 10 pieces of data and creating a new thought out of what you see is actually very unusual, it seems. I've worked with so many people who they can regurgitate other people's ideas, but they don't have new ideas. And so that's the piece where if that's something you like to do, you need to really exploit it because it's unusual to actually have new thoughts and new ideas and try to make them come to life. So that's the first thing.
You bring up an interesting point, because I want to clarify and see what you think, but often a new idea doesn't mean it has to be completely different, right? It can be a new perspective. I'll give you an example. If you're doing a presentation and say, hey, baby boomers are getting older and older, that's one perspective. But the other perspective, you can say, baby boomers are realizing, especially since you're in financial services, that they're a lot closer to getting their first social security check than they are to their high school diploma, right? It's the same facts, but it's a different perspective. And I think that's what you're talking about, right?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And seeing that uniqueness and a new perspective, maybe taking something old and looking at it in a new way is the power of success in life and in business, in my opinion. Yeah. The second thing I would say to my 16-year-old self is it's all around people. I, at a younger age, thought facts were super important. And what I've learned through all the years and the reasons I made shifts and success in my career was because I like people. I like listening to people. I find people fascinating. And that's where I've learned. And when I've gotten into tough and hairy situation, it isn't facts that have gotten me out of it. It's people. I would go talk to different people. People in legal and HR are some of the most helpful people. And one of the reasons is nobody goes and asks their opinion, and they actually have great opinions about things. So people, and also people not like us. And I know people talk about diversity all the time, whatever. I mean this seriously. Like I had my own biases. And when I would go against my inclination about somebody, I would always learn something new. And so it's all about people and not about facts per se, which probably gets to the emotion thing we were talking about.
It also gets back to what you talked about earlier in terms of truth, right? I mean, facts is supposedly truth, but then it's all relative and, it can be a moving target, right?
Yes. What was factual when I was a kid now isn't. I mean, what are the planets? Is Pluto a planet? We don't know. It was a fact when I was younger. We're not sure. And then the third thing I would say to my young self is you don't have to be perfect at everything. So here's a true confession. I hate Excel. I'm just not good at Excel. I've been in financial services for 28 years. And I would hide it from other people because I knew it was a deficit. Well, no, you just hire somebody who's really good at Excel. You don't have to be great at everything. That's not my jam. I don't get joy from it. Pivot tables break me out in hives, but I have great people who can do that. I know how to read them. I know how to use them. I just don't have to be the one to build them. So anyway, I think sometimes younger people think you have to be perfect at everything, and no one is. And not everybody's brain is set up to be perfect at everything. And if it is, they probably are a mile wide and an inch deep with everything.
I think you brought me a very interesting point early on. I think one of the biggest things that can help people in general is confidence. But I think you talk about confidence in your ability to think independently. What tips or what advice do you have on someone to develop that level of confidence?
Yeah, I get more confident when I get feedback. And so sometimes when you're not confident, you don't want to ask somebody, did I do okay in that meeting? Or what I just shared with you, does that make sense? Because it opens you up to maybe for vulnerability. But I think feedback makes you more confident, particularly when people give you real feedback. One of my challenges is I talk too fast when I'm excited about things. I've gotten that feedback forever. And when I'm in a real speaking situation, I have to really concentrate on breathing and all that. But I'm confident that that's been something consistent. I know how to work with it, and it just helps you. Whereas if I had never asked for the feedback, I would not have really known that. And so anyway, I think the essence of it is to actually be able to ask for feedback, take it in, reflect on it, and try to make changes. I mean, there are some things that are hardwired in us, but I think it helps your confidence when you know what you're good at and you know where you're not so great, like the Excel example.
Yeah, I think going back to what you said, I mean, be a little bit vulnerable, right? Because you actually will learn things from that, right? And oftentimes it's not necessarily whether someone is right or wrong. It's really understanding their perspective and seeing where they're seeing a different angle of maybe the way you say something or thought something or whatever. And I agree. I think feedback is always very, very important. And try not to take it as criticism, even though if it is a criticism, but try to one step out of your shoes and look at it from that perspective and say, is there any kernel of truth or direction you can gain out of it?
Right. And not to be political, but I'll be political. I'm an independent voter in the US. And one of the reasons is because I, through the years, have always loved hearing both sides of an argument, because sometimes I'm like, wow, I haven't ever thought of that way. And I'm independent because sometimes I agree with one side or the other side, and I like making up my own mind. Well, I miss that. Like, we can't talk anymore because things have gotten so polarized. And I truly miss like talking about different topics because I want to understand. I want to understand economic variables. Like, we're going through a crazy economic time. Yes, the market's up, but inflation's up. I'd love to have conversations about solutions to this, but I don't dare do that right now just because everyone's so prickly. But that's just an example of, that's where you learn, is to actually, you have an opinion, to say, do you disagree? Let's understand where we disagree. And you can agree to disagree at the end of it. But sometimes there's a piece of truth that's like changes your opinion. And that's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean you don't have a strong spine or whatnot. We all have to learn because, I'm not an economist, but I have my opinions of different things. So anyway, I just, being open to learning is, once you stop doing that, you start dying.
I agree. I have a couple of buddies from college that I still talk to, and even if I agree with them politically, I'll take the opposite just to see if I can argue it, right? And we'll go at it, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to dislike the person because we're a differing opinion. I still love the guy. I often think if you can actually argue the other side that you don't even really agree with, just as good as, and then I think you have a good understanding of both sides of the issue.
Right. And that's hard to do with some issues, but yeah, I agree with you. And it's a lost art. I mean, there's a whole generation of kids who don't know how to talk around differences because of this polarization we've experienced in the last however many years. And I want to get back to that because there's a lot of people who need to learn how to hear something they don't want to hear.
Well, I'm a big advocate of conversation. So, this even happens, I think, with clients or, even companies work with. Have you figured out a way to kind of nudge them along or convince them to have more conversations with their constituents?
That's a tough one. When you jump into a culture of an organization that's been set, I've gone into new companies or divisions of companies, and you go in marketing. Usually a new marketing person comes in because something's broken. It could be the product, could be the price, could be the location, could be the marketing. Seldom is it the marketing. Sometimes it's the culture. And that's the hardest thing when you're new to a culture, to actually put a mirror up and say, you guys have a problem and it's unrelated to marketing. When I was with a company for 25 years, I used to be a truth teller, but I had 25 years of people knowing that I'm well-intended if I give critiques. When you're new, you can't just speak truth to power. That does not go over well. So that is one of the hardest things. When you're in a system trying to give feedback, you have to have a lot of credibility before you're able to hold a mirror up to them.
Well, that's where the voice of the customer comes into play, right? Because ultimately they have more credibility than you because they're the ones actually going to part with their money for your product or services. So, that's where the conversations with the customers can be extremely valuable, and I add credibility in terms of truth to power. So.
Exactly. Yep.
So I'm curious, if you were to have lunch or dinner with anybody in marketing, who would it be and why?
So this is a little bit different. I feel marketing is all about psychology and sociology. And the best marketers are steeped in that. And I would want to have lunch or dinner with Renee Brown, not Renee Brown. So Brene Brown, as you probably know, just a famous sociologist. And you heard me talk about vulnerability. It isn't just because Brene talks about it. It's because I really believe what she talks about is just truth. And so I've listened to plenty of her podcasts and read her books, not her latest one. I think I need to still get that one. But anyway, I find her so insightful. And from a marketing standpoint, it helps me think differently. So she would be my pick.
Sounds good. Well, listen, Renee, it's been great talking to you. I appreciate all the insights and stories that you've been able to share with us. And I look forward to talking to you again in the future and seeing what other aha moments you've had.
Yeah, once I figure out how to make clients your marketing department, let's get back together.
Sounds great.
All right.
All right. Thank you very much, Renee.
Thank you.
Getting to AHA was brought to you by iResearch. To find out more about us, head to iResearch.com. And make sure to search for Getting to AHA in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else podcasts are found. And don't forget to click follow to ensure you don't miss any future episodes. Thank you for listening.